Do we have people in the waiting room, Madeline?
Just 2.
Okay. Oh, I love your lipstick. That's beautiful.
Yeah, my daughter, the Glamourella girl, gave this to me. So she says, "Mom, you need to start wearing lipstick again."
And Catalina, you're on the other side of the mountains, yeah?
No, 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 no. I'm looking at mountains, but they're the Olympics. I'm in West Seattle,
You're in West Seattle.
the island of
Island
West
of Hope.
Seattle.
Yeah.
I don't know when we'll get a bridge again, but one day.
I hear it's coming in September.
You know, you're the 4th person who's told me that in the last week, so here's my
Yeah,
fingers.
it was in the
They're
time.
crossed. Yeah. So what's the order of when do I have my, when am I supposed to say something?
So I think in just a minute or so, Madeline will start letting people in, and then, we'll give it a few minutes, 12:02 or so, to let people filter in. And then you're welcome to start and say whatever you would like, you and or Lauren. And then Manny and I will dive in.
Okay. Okay. Yeah.
At the start
Yeah.
of our presentation, after Jesse just does a little bit of housekeeping, is I go into the our land acknowledgement. But if you do want to ready, then I could take
No,
that
no,
up.
let's do the land acknowledgement first.
Okay.
I've been working with the Snohomish tribe on, a piece of land I've been writing poems about that was gifted to the Agrarian Trust a couple of years ago. And so I've become very aware of how important it is to respect the land and acknowledging First People
Yes.
first.
Yes. Okay. Well,
Yeah.
we have it. It's actually in our presentation. So we'll do it. So you can start. And then when Jesse takes over, it'll just flow right into it. Yes.
Okay. Okay.
Okay.
Good. So you still want me to start?
Yeah, if
Yeah.
you don't mind, just because it's in the then we don't throw our slides off too.
Oh, gotcha. Gotcha. And then how long is the presentation?
It'll be about an hour.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
I'm glad I ate before.
Madeline, why don't you go ahead and let people in?
Great. Before I do, just to double check, are we going to do the same format as before where I read the questions from the chat about the grant, or do you, because it's a smaller group, do you want to have an interactive discussion with people?
Let's play it by ear.
Sounds good. All right, I'll let everybody in.
Welcome, Madeline and Shannon. And Juan.
Hello.
Eduardo. Oh, and Solea. So good to see you. Solea, I look forward to trying to meet up in Ferry County soon.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. We're going to give it another minute or so just so folks can filter in. But we would love to hear a little bit more about you and your organization and where you're zooming in from. So if you want to open up the chat, just write in your name, which organization you represent, or if you're an independent artist, we'd love to hear that as well, and where you're zooming in from.
The Walk to a Quieter Space. Hi, everybody. I'm Shannon Hernandez, and I'm with Club Jalisco and the Washington Jalisco Sister State Association. I'm here out of my real estate office, which is what I do for work in Burien, Washington. And my organization is the one that hosts and executes the annual Mexico en el Corazón which is a Mexican folkloric ballet that does a tour around the United States from Guadalajara, Mexico.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing. All right, well, it's about 12:04. Let's go ahead and get started. Catalina, do you want to introduce yourself? You're on mute, Catalina.
Unmute, yeah. Technology, what can I say? Welcome, bienvenidos. Thank you everyone for taking time from your busy sunny Friday to join us. I am a co-founding member and board president of La Sala Northwest. It's a Seattle area organization that creates and catalyzes opportunities for Latino, Latina, Latinx artists and arts organizations, or primarily people of the Americas and the Caribbean. Our work provides artists with access to professional education, art spaces, institutional connections, expanded audiences, and commission creative opportunities. Our goal is to facilitate and promote the creative and artistic production of our community in the greater Seattle area. So come join us as a volunteer. We've got several things coming up. Next month, on August 7th, we're hosting a charla with Latinx arts organizations and artists. That will be August 7th. To sign up, if you're not on our email list, our wonderful admin person Lauren has posted a link. Come find out about the Charla community building event, and we're also going to be co-sponsoring with Napatla Cultural Arts Gallery in White Center the second annual Lowrider Block Party. And hopefully we have better weather than we did last year when I thought we were in a tornado. But there was food, there was art, there was dancing, there was music, and lots of people who look like me. So come join us, and we'd love to see you. It's free. We're always looking for volunteers. So if you have an hour or two that you can come and volunteer with us, either at the block party or at participating in the Charla, to find out what is happening with artists from the Americas and the Caribbean. This fall, we have been partnering with the Seattle Public Library on selecting a Latinx Spanish-speaking author, and we'll be having community meetings and readings and free books. So come join us. We'd love to see you. Thank you.
Inspire Washington acknowledges that we and our partners statewide are on the homelands of Native peoples who have lived in this region from time immemorial. We pay respect to their elders past and present. We also acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands where all of our cultural partners live and work. Currently, there are 42 tribes, 35 of which are federally recognized, that share traditional homelands and waterways in what is now Washington State. Some of these are nations and confederacies that represent multiple tribes and bands, and we honor and respect all of them. Inspire Washington expresses its deepest respect for and gratitude towards these original and current caretakers and culture bearers of the region. As a cultural sector, we acknowledge our responsibility to establish and maintain relationships with these tribes and Native peoples in support of tribal sovereignty and the inclusion of their voices in teaching art, heritage, natural science, and providing cultural programming. We pledge that our relationships will consist of mutual trust, respect, and reciprocity. I am Manny Kowalin, Executive Director for Inspire Washington. We are zooming in from the ancestral homelands of the Coast Salish peoples that includes, but is not limited to, the Snoqualmie, the Suquamish, the Duwamish, the Nisqually, the Tulalip, and the Muckleshoot. Welcome. I think it's always really important before we start our presentation to tell a little bit about ourselves. Who is representing you and advocating for your needs as the cultural sector? I really want to convey and assure you that I'm not a lawyer. In fact, I'm much like you. I am a cultural worker. I was born and raised in Washington State. I'm a third-generation Washingtonian. My paternal grandfather hopped a ship and came to America and worked in the fields and in the canneries of the Western coast when he arrived here in America in the early 1900s. My mother immigrated from the Philippines in the 1960s. I grew up as a, here in Seattle, Washington, within King County, although the majority of my family lives here, as well as in Grants and Adam County. I discovered in high school the power of theater. And it wasn't science or biology that got me to class every day. In fact, it was theater. It was also my 7:30 choir rehearsal. Theater saved my life. After I graduated from high school, I continued to work in theater. I founded a fringe theater company, Pilgrim Center for the Arts. I also got my first paying job at the Northwest Asian American Theater. Over my career, I've been a performer, a director. I even took some time off from the performing arts and translated my performing arts skills, my storytelling skills, into the world of museums. I was the exhibit developer and manager of at the Wing Luke Asian Museum. I've run a number of organizations, primarily organizations within and serving BIPOC communities, such as my work as managing director at the Langston Hughes Performing Art Institute. I've also run, I have a strong passion for youth programs. I was the executive director for Youth Theater Northwest. These are the experiences that really fuel how I represent the cultural sector. It's also how these experiences that really drive a deep understanding of the challenges you face, the opportunity of your work, but also I really work not just to tell my story, of course, but really to understand what your needs are, the beauty of your cultural work, and how to best represent you. I'm really thrilled to be working in partnership with Sala as we reach out and make sure that your communities, all organizations providing cultural work within Latino, Latina, Latinx, and countries from the Americas and the Caribbean. I also know that words are powerful, and we also recognize when we for this state that people use different words to describe their communities. So that I hope that you understand that we approach this Zoom opportunity with a really authentic spirit and a real warm sense of inclusion to make sure that you understand the resources before you. So I'm going to turn it over now to Jessie Wasson, our Programs and Operation Manager.
Hello, everyone. I'm Jessie. I'm just going to share a little bit about myself as well. Like Manny, I'm also from the Seattle area. I grew up on Tiger Mountain outside of Issaquah. I grew up doing theater. I was a kid stage kid out at Village, if any of you know of that theater. But I quickly grew into wanting to do stage management and more behind the scenes kind of work. And that was my focus in college as well as in grad school. I've stage managed at a lot of the big regional theaters here in the Seattle area. But I also have a love for the outdoors and working with animals. My other big passion as a kid growing up was training guide dogs for the blind with my 4-H program. And playing outside and going for hikes and all that kind of stuff. I think I have Manny beat by one. I'm 4th generation Washingtonian. My dad's family have been out here for a really, really long time. My mom's family is a little bit newer to this region. They're all came from Poland, mostly all Jewish immigrants who came over here to settle in originally Chicago and then came out to Seattle. My professional background, as I said, in addition to stage management, is also company management and production management. I also spent 4 years as the development director at Youth Theater Northwest, along with Manny Kowalling. So you fundraisers and grant writers, I know your work and how challenging and hard it is. So I'm really excited to talk about this funding and how different it is from past resources that we're so used to as grant writers. So that's a little bit about me. I'm super excited to see all your lovely faces and hopefully hear your voices a little bit more as we get going. This is our agenda for our presentation. I know you all are here to hear about the Working Washington 5 grant program, but in order for you to fully understand the details about that program and where it comes from, we're going to give you a little bit of background about what Inspire Washington does, a little bit about advocacy and how it works, and then that'll feed into the legislative session, which is how we were able to secure this $45 million through the Working Washington 5 grant program. So once we get into the grant program, we'll talk about that. We'll do a nice lengthy Q&A and make sure all your questions are answered. And at that time, I know it is a beautiful sunny day on a Friday. So at that point, for those of you who need to take off, you're welcome to. But after the Q&A, we will go through some other legislative wins, some other federal opportunities, and talk about some other programs. For those of you who want to stick around and hear those, you're more than welcome. So super excited to bounce into this.
So to get started, we want to talk about Inspire Washington, and here on the screen, you'll see our mission. Inspire Washington is opening doors to science, heritage, and the arts. So I'll give you a few moments to read our mission statement. Founded in 2019 with the merger of Cultural Access Washington and the Washington State Arts Alliance, Inspire Washington is your cultural advocacy organization. We exist to serve every state community, from Spokane to Seattle, from Kennewick to Kitsap, from Wenatchee to Whatcom, and all across the state. We aim to serve all communities by supporting all of you. You are our cultural partners. You are the ones that inspire Washington communities. All of us share common values, passions, and beliefs. Your cultural work adds uplifting value to community life, bringing joy, forging human connections, and inspiring tremendous social impact. You are not nice to have. On the contrary, your community needs you right now more than ever. You are essential to reconnecting communities after 2 years of distancing and polarization. Together, we are mighty. Inspire Washington's Advocacy Coalition combines and focuses the energy of thousands of peoples and organizations and businesses that provide science, heritage, and arts activities and experiences to every one of Washington's cities and towns. What do we do every day and year round? Coalition building. We are connecting galleries on Orcas Island with the Symphony in Vancouver, cultural programs, dance programs in Central Washington, and music venues in downtown Spokane, to name a few. We are building a big cultural team and coordinating with allies like tourism, education, and economic development. Advocacy ensures that someone is sticking up for you, the cultural sector, and representing us within every space where decisions are made and resources distributed, like with members of Congress when we advocated for pandemic relief and unemployment support for all of the people, our cultural workers that were out of work, and also within state government. But what's next? What other resources need to be developed so that your work may thrive? Is it money, laws, and policy, or something else? We want to know. We also know that you crave and rely on community within the industry. We are all holding each other up right now. Our education programs provide networking and professional development opportunities, like the Cultural Congress, our statewide conference. We are hoping to gather again in person, possibly next year. And Madeline, our advocacy coordinator, is always developing toolkits to make your advocacy and communication work easier. And she's forming district teams so that you can represent your cultural community to the lawmakers that represent you. We are committed to representing science, heritage, and arts organizations across Washington by spending more time listening, showing up in person, showing up virtually, and working in towns and communities across the state. Thank you for welcoming us today. We are your voice and your seat at the table. We are amplifying your story and drawing focused attention to what you need. We are your cheerleader. We believe in you and will fight for your work. We are connecting every corner of the state so that it's not about what Eastern Washington wants or what Western Washington wants or what the peninsula wants, but what we all need as a cultural sector, as an industry, as a cultural community to serve the greater state. We are your team. You can't do this work alone, but we can accomplish big things together. We are the lighthouse, shining a beam towards the horizon to spotlight opportunities and foresee potential challenges or threats.
So when we say the cultural sector, which is a phrase we'll use a lot today, this is who we mean. We represent 3 buckets of work. First is our science and technology partners, which include nature conservancies, fish hatcheries, zoos, aquariums, and science centers. Do we have any science partners in the Zoom house today? Raise your little Zoom hand if you're representing science, or perhaps you just really love science organizations. We'd love to see you see some love for science.
Hey, Sala, yes.
Heritage is the second bucket, which includes historical and cultural heritage sites, museums, and the humanities. For example, the Elwell Column Heritage Center out in Port Angeles. I know we've got some heritage in the house. Yep, there we go. Nice. Good to see you. And finally, the arts, which include theater, music, hip hop, spoken word, film, visual arts, and community festivals. Okay, arts, raise your hands. I know you're there. Yeah. Oh, thank you, Madeline. I'm so glad you're all here because together as a coalition, we are stronger.
To champion greater support for cultural programming, we must start with building greater awareness. Storytelling is one of the most important things we do for you. With storytelling, we aim to turn adversaries into allies, supporters into active champions. Your stories awaken an imagination that our programs offer more than a fun and entertaining Friday night. These are some of the stories that I tell. Did you know that arts and the cultural sector and the creative economy represents over 10% of the state's GDP? That's more than construction industry. Your work is essential to Washington's financial health. And rigorous studies have shown that students who engage in artistic classes are more likely to graduate. Creative learning drives academic success. This is just a small example. Join us as storytellers and share these topics with your elected officials, businesses, local media, donors, and the broader community.
Inspire Washington cannot do our work alone. Our partners are woven into the fabric of everything we do. We collaborate with organizations, governments, and advocates every day. We are the thread that brings all three together, that inspires change, creates meaningful experiences, that enhances our quality of life. Here's a list of some of our partner organizations. And in fact, just in the last couple months, we've added almost 30 new ones. So this is a very short list at this point, but they're cultural businesses just like you. They're serving their community day in and day out. As Manny said earlier, Inspire Washington was formed in 2019 around the King County Cultural Access Campaign initiative, but now we're so much bigger than that. We are a statewide coalition, and with your help, we can represent every community in all 39 counties. Here's a list of some of our government partners. We have many great relationships with lawmakers at the city, county, state, and federal level. We work with many different divisions of state government on behalf of the cultural sector. And particularly, we're of course in really close contact with the Department of Commerce and Artswell right now, as we are working with them to help get the word out about the Working Washington 5 grant program. And we're really grateful for their partnership and for their trust in our work. And finally, our advocates. None of what we do and accomplish could be done without our advocates. They are the backbone of our work, and we're so grateful for their partnerships. These are everyday folks who value the cultural sector and answer the call to support when needed. Currently, we have just over 1,700 active advocates, and we hope that by the end of the year, we'll have 2,000. Will you help us get to that goal? Okay, we're going to talk more about advocacy, and then I hope I'll convince you to join.
All right, so let's talk more about the power of advocacy and how you may engage to secure the resources that you need and to build greater awareness about what you do and why it matters. In the simplest terms, advocacy is the act of pleading for, supporting, or recommending, but it's more than that. It's not scary or intimidating or something new to learn, and I know that we get tired of new things to learn. In fact, I believe you're advocating already and you don't even know it. Advocacy exists to educate, to enlighten, to illuminate, and to inspire. Advocacy is leadership. It can be the grant you're writing or the donor letter that's due next week. Advocacy is relationship building. It can be all the outreach that draws a larger circle of supporters to your work. Advocacy is storytelling. Like when I worked at a youth theater company, because of the recession, we were on the brink of closure. So I brought the people who cared the most, the children in the program, to speak to city council. They wanted to tell their story. When you show up at your city council meeting, it's like when a pebble drops into a pond, and that impact ripples far beyond what you may see. Conversations like circles spiraling throughout your community. Now, it may be a little bit manipulative when the microphone is 5 feet tall and the children are barely pushing 3 feet. So as the executive director, it's my job to do all the things. So I had to lift the children up to the microphone so they could speak to the leaders that represent them. But maybe it's not manipulative at all. Maybe it is actually the most authentic way to express how important the program was to the children in the community. That day at City Council, we came in asking for 17,000. But by the time they banged the gavel, we walked away with twice as much. Show up at your city council with your community. Tell your story. Okay, I know there's an elephant in the room. Some of you probably have concerns. Many nonprofit leaders think that they're not allowed to advocate, but that's not true. If you're a 501c3 tax exempt organization, and I know that not everyone is, but if you are, yes, there are limitations for how much you may lobby, but advocacy is allowed. In fact, lobbying is advocacy, but not all advocacy is lobbying. So I want to create some greater understanding of this. Let me tell you exactly what lobbying is. Lobbying has 3 key ingredients. If you're lobbying, 1, you are communicating with a decision maker, and that could be the elected official, the staff member that represents them, or even voters for a ballot measure. Second key ingredient for lobbying, you must be discussing existing or potential legislation. But legislation isn't an idea for funding. You're not sitting down talking about why we need more funding for the arts or for your cultural programming. Legislation is very specific legal language and content that has been registered with the clerk of an elected chamber or council. It usually has a number like House Bill 1234 or Ordinance 5678. That is legislation. The last key ingredient of lobbying, you are urging the decision maker to vote for or against. So if you're talking to an elected official and you have those other 2 ingredients, that could be considered lobbying, and you must do that in limited amounts. So we're going to go deeper now. The IRS permits tax-exempt organizations to lobby in those limited amounts. It just cannot be a significant portion of your organizational work or percentage of your business expenses. So if you're a theater and you're spending a lot of time in Washington, D.C., or in city council, or even in virtual Olympia, and very little time in the theater rehearsing, and you're spending more money on staff members lobbying than you're actually spending on props, then you probably crossed a line. Here's a good rule of thumb. Generally, nonprofits may lobby for issues like ballot initiatives. Why? Because you're a community organization. These issues matter to your community. But generally, organizations should not participate in candidate elections. Basically, issues and not people. Why am I telling you all of this? The reason why is because if you have a hesitation about advocating, I hope that we have dispelled all of the concerns. I hope that I've convinced you about the importance of this work. In our representative government, advocacy is a critical part of the process. Your lawmakers are elected by you, your community, and they are accountable to you. They want to hear from their voters to know what's important. And trust me, I've spent a lot of time walking in the halls of Congress and even in Olympia when we could do that in person. If you don't take that meeting with your lawmaker, someone else will. And they won't be asking, I believe, for something as wonderful and as community-minded as you. Here are the essential ingredients of advocacy. I think you have all of them. 1, passion. Oh my gosh, cultural sector, creative people, do we care so much? Public benefit. I know that you have an argument, a story about why your cultural work matters and the impact, the critical impact you make in the community. Data and information. You have an opportunity to be a key informant. I want you to imagine lawmakers, they have their minds wrapped around so many issues. So often they're about 5 miles wide on the issues and about 3 inches deep. Establish yourself as somebody who has all the critical information that can really inform them about significant issues within their community. They will count on you. Common ground. This is really important to point out. Advocacy is not bullying. What you are doing is you're working with a lawmaker that represents your community, and you are having conversations and collaborating, getting to know each other so that you can find the shared values and a shared vision. Collaboration, another thing we are really great at within the cultural sector. You are partnering on a solution with your decision maker. Accountability. This is no monarchy. Don't be intimidated by people who are elected. In fact, those policymakers, those lawmakers, they work for your community. They are also a member of the community. Persistence. Oh my gosh. Sometimes it's a long road. The funding you're going to hear about today, the $45 million, was a 2-year advocacy project for Inspire Washington. You're going to have to be persistent. And the last thing, another thing we are great at in the cultural sector, vision and a solution. I know you creative and cultural people, you have a plan for your community. There are many places where you can advocate, many spaces where decisions are made and resources distributed, such as City Council, Chamber of Commerce, County Council, your local school board, regional government, state government, the federal government, and more. Survey your community. I know that there are resources that you need right now. This pandemic is going to have a long tail. Survey your community and look where the resources are. That's a place where you can tell your story.
All right, so now that Manny has told us all about what advocacy is, now I'm going to tell you how to do it. So the Inspiration League is our online advocate platform. By joining, you can become a local hero for cultural programming in your community. Everyone in the league are regular folks that believe access matters. They are there to champion culture whenever a threat or opportunity arises. This platform enables us to connect advocates to lawmakers, because when you join, you register with your address so that you're directly connected to the people that represent you. And back at Inspiration League headquarters, we're always scanning the horizon for threats or opportunities. So when there is an issue that needs attention, we send an iAlert to our Inspiration League. This is an email that is sent directly to your inbox. And in the email, there will be a link to click that opens the Inspiration League platform. On the platform, we'll break down the issue, why it matters, and what it means to your community. We always want you to know what you're advocating for and for you to make the decision. We will always be completely transparent. On that same screen, you'll be provided with a pre-written letter to your lawmaker. You have the option to edit it, rewrite it, or send it as is. You are always in control of your own advocacy. But please, even if you don't change anything in the section, please write at least a sentence or two from your own voice, because this is an email that Manny and I write, and we want it to sound authentic and individualized from each person. So please add a little bit about yourself or about your organization before you click that green send button. So you'll just fill out your name and your info, and then it'll go directly to your lawmaker's inbox. At Inspiration League, advocacy is easy, quick, and secure. With just 2 clicks, you've inspired change. When your lawmaker receives your letter, they know that their constituents care, and they know that their constituents are paying attention. There have been many occasions when we have heard from lawmakers who have expressed what a difference it makes to hear from their community. We can track the amount of letters to lawmakers that are sent through the Inspiration League, and there's a direct correlation between the number of letters and the number of dollars allocated to the cultural sector. It's that simple. The Inspiration League makes a huge difference, and it's so easy and simple to be a part of.
All right, now that we've talked a lot about what advocacy is, let's talk about when advocacy matters the most, the state's legislative session. The reason why we're doing this tour is we're in this really critical time of the year. We've had a really successful legislative session, and there's a lot of resources that have been delivered that you need to know about, but we're also approaching the next legislative session. So I'm really excited to tell you about why this work matters. All right. I don't want you to think that the state's legislative session is confusing or scary, so I'm going to make it really lighthearted to best describe it, and I'm going to use kind of an analogy. I want you to imagine the state's legislative session like a show, a theater show, because I'm a theater person. Let's imagine it as the state's legislative session, the musical. And in a musical, normally when a musical starts, lots of good musicals start with a prologue. So I want you to imagine this: Blackout, lights up, center stage. You're starting to meet the characters that you'll meet, the main characters of the state legislative session. So in this prologue, who's first on stage, on deck? The governor. The governor opens every state legislative session by presenting the governor's budget. Now, the governor can create a budget. He can't pass the budget. That's the job of the legislature. But the governor introduces the first draft of a budget. And since he's the only one in the spotlight, there's a lot of attention placed on this budget. The budget charts opportunities, spotlights, potential themes, and critical, things that the governor and the state things that are important. But the main work of passing the budget belongs to the legislature. So Blackout, start of show. Now the lights are up and the main characters of the legislature are on stage. And those are the senators and the representatives that represent all of you. They are the main characters. They have all the lines. They're going to talk a lot. They're going to debate. They're going to explain. They're going to discuss, and they're going to vote. They're going to vote. They're going to vote again. The state legislative session is the one time in the year when new laws are passed, laws are amended, and also budgets, public budgets, state budgets, which is a lot of money, when those budgets are enacted. But there's another character, lots of characters actually. They are backstage, they're behind the stage, they are in the audience. It's all of us, the communities that care. All the things that are happening in the state's legislative session will have impact, great impact on our lives. That's why it's important for all of us to be there as community and to be there as advocates. So if you don't know, the state is divided into 49 geographical state districts. Every district, your district has elected one senator and 2 representatives, and they're all representing you. This next the state legislative session happens every year. It starts in January. This next session is a really important one. Why? Because it's a biennium. You're going to hear that word a lot. In the biennium session, it's longer. It will last until about mid-April, maybe mid-May if they need more time. And during the biennium, they craft a state budget. They distribute all the state money. We need to be there because I know that our sector, your important cultural work, needs further relief and support. Again, the pandemic will have a long tail. So that's why you need to be there. By the end of the session, laws have been passed or amended. A budget has been approved for 2 years, and then the budget gets delivered to the governor for the epilogue, for the governor to approve the budget or to veto line items, and that will bring us to the close of session. Blackout.
As Manny mentioned, the legislative session is hugely important to inspire Washington and our valued partners. This is our moment. This is where and how we secure public funding and laws that are favorable to the cultural sector. Now, the legislative session is extremely complicated, with many players and objectives all working at the same time to accomplish their individual goals. There are so many steps and phases to getting a bill passed. So I want to paint a little picture for you of how this works and where you as partners and advocates fit in. So I want you to imagine that the legislature, meaning the House and the Senate, is a railroad track. They decide the directions, the stops, and the turns, and the destination. The train is a bill or a budget proviso. It's just along for the ride. It's following the track and going in the direction it's told to. Inspire Washington is the conductor. We're making sure that the train continues moving. We're communicating to stations and passengers and making sure everyone understands when and where the train is going. Literally speaking, we're communicating with lobbyists, political advisors, representatives, senators, legislative aides, cultural leaders, partners, and many more to make sure that everyone is on board, understands the direction we're headed, and any potential gaps in the track and challenges ahead. We are in the driver's seat from start to finish so that our passengers don't have to focus on the track and can go about their business and sit comfortably in the passenger cars. The passengers represent the cultural sector. They care deeply about where the train ends up, but they don't have the time or the expertise to drive the train. They've paid to be on the train and count on the conductor to get them to their final destination. The final player in this picture is the advocates, all of you. You are the fuel that drives the train. When the conductor sends an I alert, you add coal to the engine and the train gets a huge burst of energy and propels it forward. The train would simply not run without fuel.
So here at Inspire Washington, we are full of fun analogies, but really our point is that a lot of decisions are made by the state. And we know that our cultural sector needs a lot of help right now. And so we hope that we have really encouraged and invited you and motivated you to be part of this big process, because we're about to talk about resources that actually were delivered because advocates stepped up and engaged in these processes. Advocates formed teams and they met with their lawmakers during the legislative session. That's how you can engage. Right now, I'm going to start to go down the list and really get to the meat of this presentation, which is what are the resources that you can apply for. But before I do that, I want to create a little context. Prior to the state legislative session that occurred earlier this year, how much money did the state support cultural programming with? Well, did you know that the state of Washington ranks 45th in the nation for arts, state arts funding per capita? 45th in the nation. That is not a lot of investment. That was prior to the pandemic. But going even deeper than that, there was no money for the operation of our valuable museums. There is some money for some of our science partners, but that kind of veers more into the STEM world, and many organizations are left out. So basically, it was woefully inadequate. So now you're going to see what a big difference it made and how historic and unprecedented the support is that came out this year, due to all of the work of our partner organizations like ArtsWA and advocates, many people like you. This year, the state legislature approved funding for $45 million for organizations, programs, and businesses within the cultural sector with budgets less than $5 million. Jesse's going to do a deep dive and you're going to learn all about how to apply. But it didn't stop there. They also provided $5 million for the COVID-related expenses to cultural organizations with budgets over $5 million. These two line items right here ensure that every part of our valuable cultural ecosystem gets support. But there's more. They also provided these 4 items, which were actually the requests from our state arts agency, ArtsWA, such as $1.5 million for arts-based services, creative therapies for veterans, $120,000 for ArtsWA's constituent management system. Certainly not a sexy thing, but data is something that we all really have to track. So they really needed that. And also, did you know that the state provides a $10,000 stipend for the state poet laureate, and that artist is expected to travel out to communities all across the state, but that is not even a livable wage. So now this $150,000 provides funds for 2 years of this work to ensure that all communities get access to this great program. Also, the state maintains one of the largest arts collections in Washington, but if the frame of a painting gets broken or a sculpture needs restoration, there's no money, like an existing pot of funds for that. But now the state is actually investing funds to maintain a critical cultural asset. And there's more. Other films that support important work, such as the $15 million for the film incentive. We'll talk more about that later if you stick around and want to know more. As well as an addition of $6 million for a total of $18 million for the state's Building for the Arts program. Perhaps you have a facility that you want to purchase, renovate, or build from scratch. There's also money for $3.5 million for festivals and events. I think that that application window is just about to close or just closed. We can certainly give you more information about that. So and of course, we were really thrilled that our partners at WAMA, the Washington Museum Association, found funds to do their important surveying work called Museums Connects, and they're just about to announce more about that. And if you're a museum or heritage organization, please stay tuned. If you add this all up, it's not $5 million. In fact, it's $77 million. And yes, some of these monies are kind of one-time, just this year type of funds, but we'll be back asking for more. But a lot of these funds, like the money for the film incentive and the Building for the Arts, becomes a regular part of the state's budget, and you will see that investment year after year after year. It is inspiring what advocacy can do and the support it secured and how this support can support your important cultural work. So as we start to get geared up for the next legislative session, because we know we still need ongoing support, I hope you will advocate with us so that we cannot make this unprecedented, but the new normal.
All right, so now you can get out your notebooks and we're going to talk about the Working Washington 5 grant program. So a little bit of background about this. This $45 million comes from the federal budget. It comes from ARPA money. So it came from the federal budget and then it was allocated to Washington State and then it was given to the Department of Commerce to distribute. The Department of Commerce is working in partnership with ArtsWA. ArtsWA is also doing some outreach and communications on behalf of this grant. So just to say that Inspire Washington, we are not the funder. We're just a trusted messenger and have been working closely with them since March to talk about this Working Washington 5 grant program. So we're really excited and feel honored to be able to share this information with you and are just so thrilled and excited to talk about it. So let's dive into it. So as Manny said, $45 million for businesses in the science, heritage, and arts, which includes individual artists and for-profit businesses. So this includes like venues that do music on Friday nights or for-profit dance companies, they can also apply. The max grant award is $75,000. Now, I'm not imagining many organizations are going to get the max grant award. I'm thinking that most people are going to get between the 5 and 20 grand mark, but there certainly will be some that get 75. So anyway, it's a huge pot of money that I'm guessing most folks did not have in their budget to begin with. But fellow grant writers, this is the most important thing that I want you to remember and walk away from, and that this is a qualifying grant. It is not a competitive grant, meaning they are not going to compare art gallery to art gallery and pick the best one and just fund that one. This is just based on eligibility. So if you check the boxes of eligibility, you will get funded. It's going to be that simple. So you're not going to be competing or creating long narrative questions or answering long narrative questions about why you deserve this funding. You deserve this funding purely by being a cultural business. It is just that simple. You're also not going to have to talk about a specific program of where this funding is going to. Simply by existing as a cultural business, you get this funding. The application portal will be open from August 17th to August 31st. That is only 15 days in which you can submit your application. So it's super important, and the main reason why we at Inspire Washington are doing so much outreach and communication, because this is a very narrow portal, a very narrow period of time for people to apply, and we're so concerned that not everyone's going to hear about it. So we urge you as cultural partners to spread the word and tell everyone you know about this important funding that's coming to our sector very soon. So yes, August 17th through the 31st, mark your calendars. The super nice thing about this short application period, though, is that the funds are going to be distributed right away. So as soon as the portal closes in early September, they're going to start distributing funds, and everyone will have their money by the end of the calendar year. They have to distribute it by the end of the calendar year. It's written in the bylaw or the budget bill that it has to be allocated by the end of the calendar year. So that's super exciting. I'm going to go through the eligibility now. This can all be found at commercegrants.com. They now have a full FAQ page. It's like 16 pages of FAQs, as well as program eligibility and all the details of it. So you can go find all of this information at commercegrants.com. I'm going to go through the very high level of eligibility that they have shared on the website, and then we can dive deeper in if you all have any questions. So first bit of eligibility is you must be an active for-profit or nonprofit business or organization with the UBI or EIN number and physically located in Washington State. Pretty straightforward. This is the main piece of eligibility. You must be able to demonstrate financial hardship as a result of the COVID-19 outbreak. You must have experienced a reduction in business income or activity related to COVID or the result of state or local related public health measures. So this is what they're going to be looking at. You're going to be uploading your financial documents and they're going to be checking. Can you demonstrate financial hardship either in the way of business income or business activity? So either of those can be shown. So I know a lot of folks, especially theaters, often fall under this, or museums who had a huge reduction in ticket sales, but they were able to make up for it in donations and things like that. That just because you don't have financial hardship because you were able to balance that out, you still have a reduction in business activity. So it's going to be super important for you to be able to show that difference on your profit and loss statements, because that's how they're going to qualify how much funding you get. You won't be asking for a specific amount of funding. It'll be based on a myriad of factors that they'll plug into a big fancy algorithm, and then it'll spit out a number that is related to all your financial documents and things like that. So in your P&L, it's going to be really important for you to specify your different business activities and show how that went down, because I'm sure all of us did.
Hey, Jesse, could you also address that bullet point just through the view as an artist? Like, what does that mean for an artist that lost business income or activity?
Sure. Yeah, I'm sure like for an artist, maybe you didn't, you missed out on a lot of events or activities that you're normally part of. So you didn't get that income to participate in a certain event, or maybe you weren't able to sell a painting, or maybe no one was commissioning you. So that's also something to be able to show a decrease in activity. And you'll compare, you'll be submitting your financial documents for a couple different years. So they'll be able to see that change in activity.
Great, thank you.
Yeah. So you must self-attest that the expense or the loss is not funded by any other government or private entity. You have been in operation prior to December 31st, 2020. So, you need to have been around since then. And here's the parameters over money. So you must not have reported an annual gross receipts of more than 5 million in 2019. And you must have a minimum of at least $10,000 in either 2019 or 2020. So for your maximum, that must be in 2019, but to meet the minimum requirements to be eligible for this grant of $10,000, it can be from either 2019 or 2020. And this is because the Department of Commerce recognizes that because of the way things changed in 2020 in terms of being able to provide virtual programming or just changing of businesses, they want to be able to provide that opportunity for it to be either 2019 or 2020. So you can pick for your minimum. You must generate at least 51% of your revenue in Washington. So for those of you who do a lot of virtual programming, or perhaps you partner with another state nearby, really make sure and check that at least 51% of your revenue comes directly from Washington residents or other Washington businesses, because they're going to make sure of that as well. You've not permanently closed, or you intend to close this year, please don't close. So one way or the other, just say you're not, check that box, you're not going to close. Applicants must apply for one business only. Those with multiple entities should apply on behalf of their largest or most impacted businesses. So for those of you overachieving board members or staff members, if you're a part of a couple different businesses, you have to pick just one and have your name on just one application, and find someone else to have their name on that other organization. You can certainly help that other person create the application and help them with all the work, but your name cannot be on more than one application. This is just to avoid double dipping, and the government is super nervous about that. So yes, you cannot have your name on more than one application, but you can certainly help. You must have expenses that are necessary to continue business operations, and the expense is not a federal, state, local tax fee, license, or other government revenue. So basically you just have to have expenses beyond what you pay the government to stay in operation. You must adhere to all required COVID public health measures. So if when we were supposed to close and you didn't, and the government found out about that, then they're not going to fund you. So hopefully you didn't and you followed all the rules. Now, this is a fairly new requirement. You must have what's called a UEI number, which is a unique entity identification number. Or so this is from the federal government, is what used to be called a DUNS number. For any of you who might be familiar with that, the federal government is switching from the DUNS numbers to the UEI numbers. And you have to have this prior to getting the money. So you don't have to have it just to apply, but you have to have it before you're able to click that button to get the money from the government. So this is kind of a complicated process. So I urge you, if you don't have this yet, go onto the website sam.gov right away and start that process as soon as you can. It could take several weeks to get that number. For those of you who already have a DUNS number, it's a much easier process. You should just be able to go onto the website and then click to be able to see your UEI number, or just apply to get a new one. It's a much faster process, but we're told to get a brand new UEI, it could take weeks. So get going on that right away. Okay, I'm going to talk a little bit about the application process. As I said earlier, it's administered by the Department of Commerce in partnership with Artois, and everything you need to know about this application and then to eventually apply is online at commercegrants.com. For the application, you will be required to upload valid identification and financial documents, including but not limited to your tax return, your P&L statements, 990s, 1099s. And actually, with the new FAQs they released on Monday, there's actually a lot more other types of financial documents you can upload as well. But these are kind of the main ones that I think most people know about. The application is going to be super easy. It's going to take about an hour tops. I mean, it might take you a little bit more time, maybe 2 hours if you need to get your financial documents in order and all that kind of stuff. But it's going to be super simple. We're told about 8 to 15 questions, nothing with long narrative explanations. They probably are going to ask you to describe the nature of your business. But beyond that, you're not going to be proving or explaining any more about what your business does and why it's important. So it's just a matter of who are you. There's going to be a lot of tech support provided by Commerce, including chat, email, and phone. All of that will become available on August 17th when the grant opens. The application will be available in up to 12 languages. And best of all, fellow grant writers, there will be no reporting. Hooray. So it's my favorite thing to talk about. I always end with this because it's the most exciting part. So once you're done with your application and you've submitted it and you've gotten your money and everything is good, you don't have to submit any sort of report about how you use the money or where or when. I mean, they want you to use the money. It's not like they don't care, but they certainly don't need you to report it. And that's because this grant is specific to addressing past financial hardship. So in their mind, you've already done the report because you've already had the financial hardship. It's in the past. You already showed that you incurred that. So that's why there's no reporting. It'll be super simple and super easy. So I hope I've encouraged all of you to apply. At this point, I'm going to open it up for Q&As, see if maybe do we have any questions. We can certainly answer anything that you may have or be curious or wondering about. Go ahead, you can just unmute yourself and join us if you have a question.
Jesse, I have a question. One thing that I've observed is that a lot of small organizations and artists really hustled during the pandemic and, found ways to supplement lost income in other ways. But what isn't really reflected by that is like the backbreaking amount of work that it took to do that. But if someone were just looking at like a tax return, it may not show as much of a dip in income. It's a little.
This is why it's so important to include your profit and loss statement, because on your profit and loss statement, you can break it out by activity. You can clearly say, you can name your different activities, name the different programs that you do or projects that you work on, and they can see, in 2019, let's say you did 5 programs, and then you can show that in the next year there's 0. So it'll be super important. They're really going to be looking at those. So it's super important, especially for independent artists, teaching artists, folks like that, to really take time to specify on your profit and loss statements and show the change in your business over those 2 years.
Well,
Yeah,
and I think the key word that you said there was that artists supplemented, right? So supplement is so they found something else, but they did that because there was loss of activity. So you're really honing in on the loss. And I do get it that there's a lot of artists that don't create profit and loss statements. But what you could do is, I mean, at heart, a profit and loss statement at its most simplest form is really just an Excel spreadsheet that takes your income. Yeah, that takes your income. So let's say you have $30,000 of income one year, and you just really go through and say, yeah, so in 2019, $20,000 of income, I'm just using that as a number, $20,000 of income was artist fees. Right. And then the next year showing that the vast majority of it was some other thing. It was DoorDash. It was, it was side gigs. It was other work, but it wasn't artist fees. That's the story that you want to tell. And you're right. The artist may have to just create a little very simple Excel spreadsheet that is your profit and loss statement that really articulates that, as Jessie has said.
Yeah.
Can you use explanatory notes on a spreadsheet to sort of highlight where those things are?
Totally. Yeah,
Tell
they
that
are going to
story
want
properly.
Yeah, they are going to want to just see the numbers for sure on like an Excel or even Word table or whatever. But yes, certainly include any notes. They'll read those for sure.
Yeah. And one thing that we have not seen yet, and there's a really good reason, but this is a really good way for me to express a really important thing that just happened. We have not seen the application, and we purposely cannot. And the reason why is because in the issue of fairness, right? No one should have access or get inside information about that application. So, however, so we haven't exactly seen how you'll do that, but we understand that detail is something that we understand that in concept.
That's been explained to us that is happening. Yeah,
exactly. I will say though, that something that we could all probably really care about is that because of our advocacy and recommendation, we were able to ensure that a number of leaders of color sworn to secrecy could review the application for the purposes of equity, to make sure that that the barriers that we've all gotten used to that speaks to one group or whatever, that there's what I'm trying to say is that there's been equity review of the application. So we don't have anything more we can share about the application, but that's the way it's been explained to us. But we're also grateful that the Department of Commerce, as mandated by the governor, is addressing issues of equity and the perceptions that communities of colors may have based off of how things have been presented in the past.
And in full transparency, we can't see the application because Inspire Washington will be applying for this grant as well.
Yes, we lost a lot of money, just like you.
Yeah. See, do we have any questions in the, let's see, it looks like questions in the chat. Aaron, do you have a sample profit and loss statement that details loss of activity? I don't have an example, but really, like we were talking about earlier, it's really just a matter of taking an Excel document and listing out the things that you do, what your organization does. Something like if you have a QuickBooks kind of account, just your chart of accounts is basically what it is. The things that you spend money on and the things that you get money for. And then just creating a table and then just the money that comes in or out for each of those things. And to be honest, if you need help doing this, I'd be happy to help you. We can set up, we're going to be doing, once the application portal opens, we're going to be doing help sessions where Manny and I will literally just be having, a couple hours of office hour time, and we're just going to be helping people with their application. So if that's something that you need help with in creating that Excel document and some ideas around what that looks like, can also just kind of Google what is a profit and loss statement, and that'll kind of give you some examples of what things to include. But we'd be happy to walk you through that one-on-one.
And one thing I'm going to add, Aaron, too, here's one way that we can really advocate for you as well. Artois is the communication and outreach lead that Department of Commerce has contracted. So we certainly get that, artist grants from the state are few and far between. So we get it that a lot of these kind of standard things that organizations have, these that artists don't have as much experience with. So what we'll make sure that we convey to ArtsWA that some artists have asked, for all the materials that they're creating as part of their communications. I mean, I think that's a great idea. We'll
Yeah,
certainly ask.
I bet we could get ArtsWA to create a template for us.
Yeah, exactly. A template, an example that they can put on the website and just show how an artist would do that. Because I get that the words profit and loss already start to feel a little bit intimidating. Well, so we will convey that. We don't get to decide what they do, but they've been really receptive. They're always asking us, what are you hearing? What do people need? There's a real collaboration on making this a low barrier grant. So we'll convey that to them for you.
And to answer your other question, Lauren, about fiscally sponsored organizations, yes, they should definitely apply. They should apply as independent organizations, not with under the umbrella of their fiscal sponsor. They should just apply on their own.
Yeah, and I want to say one thing about that fiscal umbrella. It's one thing that we're not really used to in grant making for cultural work is typically grants are usually just for nonprofits. So a lot of the times those fiscal umbrellas exist to be able to provide that nonprofit fiscal sponsor to be able to funnel money to organizations that have not gone through the steps of getting applying for incorporating as a nonprofit within the state of Washington, or securing, because it's a long and expensive process, your 501c3 tax exempt. But I just want to remind you that this grant is different. Commercial and for-profit can apply. So that reason of having a fiscal umbrella is not necessary. But I also get it that sometimes fiscal umbrellas also offer other services, tracking grants, being your bank account. That's a different thing. But Jesse's right. The organization should apply because your fiscal umbrella is also eligible to apply. And you can't use the same number. So it's better to apply as your unique organization.
Great questions. Do we have any other questions out there?
Aaron, just be sure to email Manny at inspirewashington.org or Jesse with an I. And when we find out something, so we can come back to you and tell you what ArtsWA said, if they can put that template, and we'll urge them to put it on the application website as an example.
Yeah. Oh, and Madeline just put our email addresses in the chat.
Oh, great.
What are the 12 languages of the application that will be available? These, I can't, they're on the they're on the FAQ document. They do list all the different languages. I don't know them all by heart, but basically they took the top 12 languages that are spoken in the state, I believe, and that's how they decided which ones to use. But I can also, and maybe Madeline, while we keep talking, can find it in the FAQ document. It does list out all of them.
Yep. And there's a really robust, so the company that was contracted by the state to manage the application portal is Submittable. And what we have been told that the support services, when the portal opens and begins accepting applications on August 18th, the support materials are really robust. Jesse, do you want to talk about like when people are in the middle of the application, the kinds of things that they could get as far as support, technical assistance?
Sure, it's right here on the screen, but yes, there's chat support, email, and phone, which will be available 8 hours a day, 7 days a week during the time that the portal is open. So lots of opportunity to connect with people. They're great at providing technical assistance. But if you need help more with like eligibility type questions, those are probably best at this point to just come to us, and we can filter them through Commerce if we can't answer them. But Manny and I, and Madeline as well too, we've been answering a lot of questions over the last 2 or 3 months. So we've heard a lot of them at this point. So chances are we could probably answer it for you. But if not, we are happy to reach out. We have a meeting again with them on Monday. Yep. So we can send more questions to them on Monday and let you know right after that.
And since La Sala broadcast this statewide, for the 2 weeks that the application is open for submittal, Inspire Washington will actually be in residency. So we plan to actually have some office hours, not only virtually, but physically present in a couple communities. Jess, you want to tell them where we'll be for those 2 weeks?
Sure. So we're going to be, if any of you are in the Southwest region, so down by Vancouver, we're going to be down there August 9th through the 12th. And then we'll be in the Tri-Cities and Walla Walla area, so Southeast Washington, August 16th through the 19th. And then August 23rd through the 26th will be in Bellingham and San Juan Islands, and like kind of the northwest area of the state. We'll take a week off for Labor Day, but then we'll be back in September, starting up in with the Wenatchee and North Cascades area. This doesn't overlap with the grant portal, but just we'd love to see you if you live in these particular areas. We'd love to see you in person anyway. So yeah, September 6th through the 9th will be in Okanagan and Wenatchee area. And then the week of the September 13th will be in Yakima Valley. So Yakima, Ellensburg, Tieton, that area. And then we're ending our tour out on the peninsula starting September 20th. So we'll be visiting communities out in Kitsap, Jefferson, and Clallam County.
And we're still developing kind of the all of our public programs out there, but imagine there'll be a town hall, there'll be a, imagine kind of a technical assistance drop in for, there'll be a 2-hour window or 3-hour. We'll find like maybe a library or community cultural venue where you can drop in, bring your computer. We're there to help you get through the application and to hit submit, right? That's, so just because you're on this call, if you're not on our newsletter list, since make sure you join, or we'll add you. And in the weeks to come, we're going to be sending out a more detailed schedule about our Inspire Washington residencies and the opportunities for you to join us.
And for those of you who are in King County and are looking for some in-person help, just email us. Manny and I are both located in the Seattle area, so we can certainly we could schedule some office hours in the Seattle area if that's useful. All right. When we're coming to Ferry County, yes, we will. We are going to be coming to Spokane and that in the Northeast region. We might end up going to Republic, which is kind of sort of near Ferry County, Republic, Washington, where we have a partnership with one of the schools up there. So we're going to be going up there probably in September. So yeah, maybe we can connect depending on where in Ferry County. That would be a great time to connect. Okay, any other questions? Awesome. Okay, great. So at this point, this is kind of the end of our chat about Working Washington 5 and kind of what we as Inspire Washington do for advocacy and statewide support. We do have a little bit more in our presentation where we talk about a little bit more about the other wins that we mentioned. So we'll talk about the film incentive, building for the arts, heritage capital. We'll talk a little bit about federal advocacy, as well as arts education. So if any of those things interest you and you have time, please stick around. Otherwise, if y'all are busy, this is a great time to step out if you need to and move on with your weekend.
And if you are about to leave, I just really want to thank you so much for making time for us today. I know that you listened to a lot of the Working Washington 5 information as a potential applicant, but I also want to just talk to you as a community. Look around the chat. There's a lot of your partners that aren't here. And there's $45 million on the table. So really, this is not a competitive grant process. We believe there's money for everyone. And we know that all of the cultural programs that serve Latino, Latina, Latinx communities all across the state of Washington are vital, are important. So reach out to your friends, to your partners, to creative people that you know in your community across the state. Tell them, give them the website, direct them to our next webinar, anything just to ensure that during the dog days of summer that they don't blink too long and miss their opportunity to claim their funding. This is for them too.
All right. Thank you all for joining us. And for those of you who are still here, thank you so much. We'll keep going.
All right, so let's explore how.
Yeah, I'm going to talk quickly about the funding for organizations with budgets over $5 million. So we spoke a little bit about this when Manny listed out all the different wins. There's a second pot of money reserved specifically for these larger cultural institutions, which includes COVID costs for testing, PPE, additional staff, any other expenses related to COVID. This will be distributed also by the Department of Commerce, and there'll be more information about this in the fall. So this grant portal will be come open after Working Washington 5.
So let's explore how the state may support the inspirational places in your community. There are several funding programs for cultural facilities, and let's start with Building for the Arts. Since 1991, state government has provided $129 million for more than 262 capital projects through the Building for the Arts program. Funds may be used for the acquisition, the new construction, and/or major renovation of arts facilities. The program is administered by the Department of Commerce. Arts Watch chairs the Grant Selection Committee, and the maximum grant award is $2 million. Last year, Cultural Advocacy increased the state's investment to $18 million biannually, and they reduced the onerous matching requirement. For 25 years, it was a $12 million investment, but with the uptick in the cost of steel and timber, that value went down and down. So now we are thrilled that the investment was increased. Why did they do this? They did this because they want to encourage more projects, more arts facilities across the state of Washington, but especially outside of the central Puget Sound. So if you are in Eastern Washington, if you're in a different corner of the state, these funds are for you. We thank Arts Fund for championing this program. Applications are accepted every 2 years. In fact, the last deadline was June 23rd. So if you weren't ready, I know that capital campaigns are a lot of work and they take a lot of time to prepare for. Your next opportunity is spring of 2024. Reach out to us. We're happy to connect you with people in commerce if you want to just get a better understanding about the program as you start to plan how to be application ready. Heritage Capital, similar to Building for the Arts. The Heritage Capital Program provides public access to history and supports the capital needs of facilities and organizations that preserve and interpret Washington's history and heritage. So this funding may be used for capital projects at historical museums, historical archives, and societies, for historical sites as well. The program is administered by the Washington State Historical Society. The program invests $10 million every 2 years, and the maximum grant award is $1 million. April 12th was the deadline earlier this year to submit eligibility review. So if you missed that or you weren't ready, because again, capital campaigns take a lot of planning to be application ready, your next opportunity is late winter of 2024. There's also a new program to invest in cultural facilities, the Historic Theater Grant Program, which was founded by and created by the state legislature in 2021. Did you know there are more than 80 operating historic theaters in Washington? They are scattered in both small towns and urban neighborhoods. These buildings, like the Paramount Theater in Seattle or Mount Baker Theater in Bellingham, or the 7th Street Theater in Hoquiam, they are jewels of their communities. They're also aging rapidly. Old buildings are not often very accommodating to people with disabilities, and the collective cost for deferred maintenance is growing astronomically. This program is housed within the Washington State Department of Archaeology and Historic Preservation. Your new acronym of the day is DAP. And the program is managed by the Washington Trust for Historic Preservation. The next application cycle, we hope, will be announced later this year. The state's investment in these facilities is extremely modest. It was only $350,000 last year, but the actual deferred maintenance cost for all 80 facilities exceeds $40 million. Join us in advocating to the legislature to invest more money, significant money, to ensure that across Washington State, these jewels, these architectural jewels of their communities continue to serve communities in an accessible way for years to come. Wrapping up, cultural facilities, they transform communities. State funds are a modest investment considering the huge and ongoing returns that these facilities deliver. As we all know, the programs in the building will expand and enrich local quality of life, but they will also have an impact on the state's economy through tax revenue and broad job creation. And when the construction is done and they cut the ribbon and audiences flow into the performing arts facility or the museum or any of these cultural sites, we also know that the restaurant across the street does better. People are throwing change in local parking meters, and the local economy is humming. In Washington, culture means business.
So I'm going to talk a little bit about the film incentive program. 32 of our 50 states have a film incentive program. This means giving benefits to the production companies that film in that particular state. Production companies bring tons of business to a community. They rent hotels, they dine at restaurants, they purchase equipment, they hire locals, and not to mention just bring a lot of visibility to the area. For example, think about how much business Orcas Island got after Free Willy came out, or Lake Union with Sleepless in Seattle, or one of my favorites, Officer and a Gentleman, which was filmed out in Port Townsend. Well, for the past several years, most films that have been set in Washington weren't actually filmed here. I'm sure we all are aware of that, right? They're either filmed down in Portland or they filmed up in Vancouver. And that's because those areas offered a larger film incentive program. Well, now I'm super excited that we in Washington can now compete with that. Prior to this year, our film incentive was a small $3 million. Now we have $15 million, which also includes some funding for local filmmakers. So a pot of that 15 will be reserved specifically for local Washington filmmakers. Additionally, we are the first in the nation to offer an additional 10% enhancement for a company that is going to film in a rural community, and a second additional 10% enhancement for companies that are going to tell a story of a marginalized community. We are the first in the nation. We're very excited to be doing this. I know the rest of the country are going to be looking to us. So we're really excited to have those additional enhancements. There's also going to be some funding to support first film. So oftentimes when a filmmaker is just starting out, they're really struggling to get the initial investment involved in their project. So now the folks at Washington FilmWorks and WhipSmart will support first filmmakers so that they have a pot of money to then go around and shop around for additional investors. And they have some money that says, hey, look, Washington FilmWorks believes in my program, you should too, or my project, you should too. So we're really excited about that. This legislation was driven by Washington FilmWorks and supported by Inspire Washington and our fabulous advocates. Let's talk a little bit about arts education. The Arts for All Coalition is a combined partnership between Inspire WA, Arts WA, which is our state arts agency, Arts Ed WA, which is a state nonprofit working to improve and expand arts education, and the Office of Superintendent of Public Instruction, which is the government agency that oversees all of our public K-12 schools. This coalition is working to provide full inclusion of arts learning in all public schools in Washington. We know that not all schools are equal, but in order to make meaningful change, we have to know where we're starting from. The state hasn't done any study or survey on arts learning since 2009, and a lot has changed since then. We have tons of anecdotal stories that we share with lawmakers and funders, but without any real data to prove that there are schools and students without art access, we cannot fix the problem. We have to be able to prove and show with data the inequities. So the A4A Coalition exists to address those inequities in arts education in Washington state through broad changes in statewide leadership in all 4 Arts WA defined regions of our state. With partnership planning and data, we'll be able to more deeply understand the arts education landscape in all 39 counties, and then use that data as a catalyst to manifest more equitable arts education experiences for every child. Within our Inspiration League, we have a section just for arts education called our A4A Champions. So if arts education is something you're super passionate about and want to advocate specifically for that, go to our website at inspirationleague.org and you can join our A4A Champions League and be part of the change. Manny, you're on mute.
Sometimes what happens in the legislative session is a little bit magical. So here we were as a coalition, determined to find a pathway to ensure that all students have equitable access to arts education. And then the legislation starts and you discover that the legislature is 10 steps ahead. This year, Senator Rolfes introduced Senate Bill 5878, which after lots of discussion and debate was passed into law. And let me tell you what this does. As in the state of Washington, arts education is considered basic education, like math is basic education. But here's where the discrepancy lies. I know that my nephew in the 5th grade has a math class every day, but he and many other students across the state may not get an arts education class, performing or visual arts, every day. How is that possible when arts education is basic education? Even though arts education is basic education, there are only graduation requirements for high school. And across the state, there is varied level of access. It is not equitable. Now, you may be sitting here in the Zoom going, well, that doesn't make sense. My student, my child gets arts education, your child. But maybe you're also in the Zoom and you're like, yeah, I get it. My child does not. We are dedicated in the belief that arts education provides tremendous avenues for a child to explore their innate creativity and to tap into their unique skills and abilities. And therefore, there should be equitable access. So Senate Bill 5878 clarifies that arts education is basic education and therefore mandates, like math, that every student in every school district with over 200 students, which is the majority of school districts across the state of Washington. So every student within every school district at every school and at every grade level will have the option of a performing arts class or a visual arts class. And this will begin in school year 23 and 24. Now, it may sound really simple, the objective, but it's actually a little complicated, especially for our more remote and rural school districts. Because when you're a remote or rural school district, you may not have the certified teachers that are endorsed to teach these classes that you are now required to teach. That's why we are really grateful to the legislature for being focused on the goal, but also providing implementation time to figure out how they're going to help all of the school districts meet this mandate. We don't want Senate Bill 5878 to be punitive, and punishing for students that can't meet the mandate. What we just really care about is that every student gets equitable access to the inspiration that comes from arts education. So there's a lot of work still to do. OSPI is still conducting bill analysis and trying to figure out how they will help the schools. What's the pathway to get to implementation? And we'll probably have more discussion on this during the next legislative session. Inspire Washington will spend some time traveling out to school districts and meeting with superintendents in our more remote and rural school district, because we don't want to fuel any Eastern or Western division of our state, but really just address the dynamic of having different regions that have different access to teachers and other resources. So we're going to try to figure out how we can help. So more to come on this, but I think today what we can do is celebrate that the state of Washington recognizes the value of arts education and has now clarified that every student in every school and at every grade level should have this opportunity. We also work in a lot of different spaces. During the pandemic, federal advocacy became really important as we advocated for extended unemployment insurance, as an example, because so many of our cultural workers and creative people were out of work. Also, the Paycheck Protection Program, which provided a lot of organizations, not all of them though, with valuable support to make sure that their business survived the pandemic. We are seeing now, a reduction in federal relief, but that doesn't mean that we don't stop advocating in that space. Right now, in our federal advocacy work, we're really focused on the approval of the 2023 federal budget, because the money that is allocated to the National Endowment for the Arts, a bunch of that money actually ends up in Washington as the core budget of the Washington State Arts Commission. More money appropriated upstream in Congress leads to more money downstream in Washington and California and even in Texas. So that's really the focus of our work. We're also focused on a number of different bills. If you want to pay attention or be involved in federal advocacy, just make sure you're registered in the Inspiration League. That's where we'll send out alerts. We work with a lot of different partners, such as the Creative States Coalition, because there's an organization like Inspire Washington in every state, and we form a great team advocating for arts and culture across our great nation.
All right, so let's talk a little bit about cultural access. In 2015, our state legislature created a law that allowed cities and counties to adopt their own cultural access program with a sales tax of 0.1%, which works out to be about $15 to $30 per household per year, depending on the location. This creates a fund for cultural programs, which would go towards free and reduced tickets for community members, field trips for kids, outreach to marginalized communities, and expanded resources for cultural programs. Organizations would get about 10% of their operating budget directly from taxpayers. This means less time fundraising and more time serving your audiences. Tacoma voters elected to create this program in 2019, and just a few months ago, Olympia voters also said yes to cultural access. Cultural Access is a cornerstone program of Inspire Washington, and we want to help other communities all across the state adopt their own. If you want to learn more about bringing cultural access to your community, come find us or email us, and we can talk more about that.
Inspire Washington is powered by the investment of cultural partners. We are a membership organization, but I don't use the word membership in an exclusive way. Regardless if you invest in our work or not, you are our partner, you are Inspiring Washington, and we will advocate for the resources that will fuel your work. But we also recognize in our advocacy world, we still have a lot of work left to do. We anticipate hearing from all of you that this pandemic has a long tail, and we still have about 3 to 5 years of full recovery. And I'm certain that you all get really tired and worried when you watch the news and hear talk of a possible recession. The next legislative session is super important. Although our work throughout the rest of the year is ensuring that there is an equitable investment of state and public funding through the Working Washington 5 program, we're already looking to January and starting to imagine what we should be asking for to support your work next year and the year afterwards, since the state will craft a 2-year budget. So I hope you will consider, especially after you get your grant from the Working Washington 5 program, but I hope you'll consider joining Inspire Washington. Our dues, our partner levels are really affordable. We have dues, partner levels based on age of members for individuals, anywhere between 35 and 75. And the vast majority of organizations will pay around $100 to become an invested cultural partner. But it's more than the money. We speak to lawmakers every day. So imagine this, the next time I speak to the state speaker of the House or to the governor himself, and when I talk about the needs of the cultural sector, I want to show a list of organizations that aren't just from Seattle, that span the entire map of Washington, representing every community, so that the governor knows, or any elected official knows, that when they're talking Inspire Washington, they're actually talking to an organization that serves millions of Washingtonians, that they're accountable to every community, and that deserves cultural support to fuel a prosperous cultural future. Please join Inspire Washington. You can find information on our website. Click on the tab Join at inspirewashington.org.
Thank you all for listening. That is the end of our presentation. It was so great to spend the afternoon with you. And if you have any other questions, we'd love to answer them now, or we'll send out the link. Madeline will figure out how to download this program over the weekend or on Monday, and then we'll send out that to everyone who registered. And we'll also put it on our website, so it could just be publicly accessed as well.
And I know many of you are watching this by recording, so you may not be able to see the chat box. If you'd like to contact me, my email address is Manny, M-A-N-N-Y, at inspirewashington.org. And Jesse's is Jesse with an I, Jessi at inspirewashington.org as well. And if you want to sign up to be an advocate, contact our advocacy coordinator, Advocacy at inspirewashington.org.
Thank you all.
Take care. Goodbye.